sure to ask me 3 times. Always very silly. Okay, I think we might be live and being silly. Hello, world. Hello, folks who have joined us on the Squirrel Squadron to talk with Johanna Rothman. I'm going to learn to say Johanna's name. It says we're having trouble with LinkedIn. So we'll talk for a minute, but we'll see if we can get LinkedIn to work. And I'm going to ask Laura, our very, very capable community manager at the Squirrel Squadron, can you check that we're okay on LinkedIn? Oh, I just got a check mark. So I hope that means that we're actually live on LinkedIn. Hi, LinkedIn. Hi to anyone who's joining us from any of the platforms. I'm going to be introducing Johanna very shortly. And I apologize ahead of time for my throat. I've just had a bit of a cold. So sorry you have to listen to me, but you're going to get to listen to Johanna, who's a world-class expert, author of I forget how many books on software management. And we have some really great stuff on fake Agile to talk with you about today. Let me do the very briefest of introductions. Laura, do tell us if we're live on LinkedIn or not. I just want to make sure that that's all working. And something else has happened over here. Sorry, I have to turn things off. Oh, come on. Too many technical challenges. Go away, go away. There we go. It's gone. Super. Sorry for the distractions. Right. So if you don't know where you are or why you got here or anything like that, let me just introduce you to the Squirrel Squadron. So I'm Squirrel. I'm your host. And I run something called the Squirrel Squadron, which is a community of thousands these days. We keep growing it of tech and non-tech executives. And we all work together and learn together about software and how to help tech teams and what all that crazy technology means. How do you work with it? And if you're in the technology space, what all those crazy people in suits are doing. How do we work better to get to them? Ryan says LinkedIn is working. That's good. Laura, could you please still check that for us? I'm not sure if Laura is watching, so I'm just going to give her a quick check. Is LinkedIn working for you? Laura, just let us know, give a quick wave, anything else like that to let us know how LinkedIn is doing. Okay, and so what's this Squirrel Squadron thing? Oh, Laura's giving us thumbs up. Perfect. This Squirrel Squadron thing is my way of giving back. So it's all free. People have trouble believing that. They say, Squirrel, you got to be charging for this. I don't believe in it. I think we need to get people working together better. And if we can do that, that has benefits for everyone, including me. But mostly for the people who come to, for example, the forum, where we have loads of interesting conversations. We had lots of folks respond to the poll that I put up about how your team functions. Are they obedient or not? And that's something I'm going to ask Johanna about. We also had a great discussion I was weighing in on this morning on something I know Johanna knows all about, the walking skeleton, and making sure that for a big retailer, where they're rolling out a whole new system, that they can report effectively on how that system is getting rolled out. And so it makes sense to the rest of the business, how far they are and whether they're on track. So I think, Johanna, we should use that example. That's a really good one for us to talk about, I think. So there's all those kinds of discussions on the forum. They're happening all day, every day. We have people from Australia, from Africa, from Europe, all around the world. It's really great to see all the discussions and things happening among that group. I weigh in when I can, but often people have super ideas they share directly with each other. And then we have these events. So I get to talk to amazing people like Johanna all the time, but also do events for the community. And the ones that are coming up soon include one next week on strategy mistakes. So I'll tell you some war stories and some horror stories and maybe some success stories as well about how people have made mistakes in their tech strategy. What crazy stuff did they do? I can tell you about one, for example, that outsourced everything. And that did not work out very well for them. When you outsource everything, that's not such a good idea because you wind up with nothing in-house. And that was not a good result. Then in a couple of, it's about 6 weeks now, I'm going to be live in London. So I'll be talking there about technology language as a foreign language, because we talk about zettabytes and Kubernetes and all these kind of strange words, and they can be very intimidating. But there's lots you can do, whether you're on the side of people who know those words and use them and want to explain them to other people, or you're on the side of people who go, oh my God, I don't know what those crazy people are talking about. There's lots we can do to get across that language gulf. So I'm going to be talking live with people about that. And Laura is busy setting up events in Stockholm, Latvia, and a couple other places I can't even remember that look like they're promising and coming in the next few months. So lots of opportunities to chat together, to learn together, and that's the thing that I love to do for the forum. So very glad that all of you are here. Now, some of you have already said things like, "Hey, LinkedIn is working. Thumbs up. Good evening, everyone. This is great." And someone from LinkedIn, which confirms to be great. LinkedIn's working. Got me all very worried because most people tend to watch this on LinkedIn. And you've now all figured out where the comment button is. So please use it. I have much better interactions, and Johanna is nodding vigorously because I know her. She would love to have your comments and questions, because I bet a lot of you are dealing with exactly the issues of fake agile that we're going to be talking about. If you don't say anything, we'll have a shorter time together. We'll still have a wonderful time, but we won't answer your question. So please get off your butt, type something. What I'd really like to hear is what brought you here? Is it because you're concerned you're going to have some fake agility? You think you might have it, but you're not sure? You're really sure you have it, and you're not sure what you're going to do about it? Whatever the issue is that brought you here, I would sure like to hear it, and I know Johanna would too, so we can deal with it. And please type in more things in the chat. I wish you could jump up and shout at us, but since you can't, put it in the chat. We can see them, all those comments wherever you are. And we'll do our very best to get through as many of them as we can. Whatever we don't get to, I will make sure to look at in the forum in a follow-up post. Good. All right. So I think that's all the introductory material. Yes, it is. Johanna, would you mind giving us a really brief summary of who you are, where you came from? I've read so many of your books, so much of your material. I'm a big fan, as you know. But tell our listeners and viewers what things excite you, and where did you come from?
I am an expert in managing product development, and all three of those, the management and managing, the product and the development. I started off as a software developer myself. I am no longer capable as a software developer, but I certainly understand the issues around development and testing. And my current focus, if you can even, because it's a very broad focus. So I worry when I say the word focus. But my hope and my job is to help people create a better environment so they can manage their product development effectively. That includes the workspace, and the products themselves.
Wonderful, fantastic. And Johanna, you're being so modest. You've been doing this for 20, 30 years. I don't even know how long. And you've produced an
Well,
amazing body of work. So just tell folks, what are your favorite books that you've written? I think maybe most of the ones on the shelf behind you might be by you. I'm not sure. But you're prolific. You have so much
I
material. What's most
yeah.
recent? What's most
So
exciting to you that you've written
my
or done
yeah,
recently?
my most recent is the Project Life Cycles book, and my the books before that about managing product development in the organization were the Modern Management Made Easy series. I've also been writing books for individuals who want to manage their product development. So, Free Your Inner Nonfiction Writer, Successful Independent Consulting, all those. I am um, yeah, um, I have the gray hair to prove this. I've been working for
I'm
almost
working
40
on it.
years.
I'm working on it. It's not all there
Yeah,
yet. Go on.
yeah. I have a few years on you. Um,
You do.
I've been working for almost 40 years. I've
Wow.
learned a lot. I have screwed up, and I've learned, right? So I
And then
have
you
had
wrote about it. You
much,
let people know about it. That's the thing I respect so much, is that I
yeah,
learned so much from books like older works of yours, like Behind Closed Doors, which
right.
is wonderful for new software managers. I recommend it to all my clients when somebody is learning how to be a software manager for the first time. You tell the story, you say exactly how it worked, and all the screw ups. I imagine some of the main characters in there are Johanna.
Yes. And thank you for recommending it. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I recommended all of your books all the time. They're fantastic. And so I know we're going to have a fantastic conversation. Let's define the terms. Oh, and by the way, we have some very great comments here, which I'll come to. But let's first define, what would you say is fake agile? Because you suggested this topic to me, and I said, oh my God, we've got to talk about that. But what does it mean to you when you see fake agile? How do you recognize it? What is it? How do you know it's there?
So when I see um, teams of people work individually, when their work in progress overwhelms them because they're not collaborating, and they have no idea when anything will be done. When they spend more time estimating and planning and preparing than they do actually delivering something and getting some feedback. So uh, if I could do one thing to help all these teams understand what agility really means, it's how fast can you deliver something, even if it's just internally, to get some
Just my
feedback.
favorite term.
Right.
Yes.
Just um just to get some feedback from the entire team, from the product owner, from organization wide people. Everyone is interested in what you're doing. Right? Everyone wants to know, where are you and when will you be done? Now, the flow metrics will help everybody do that. But the more we work individually, the less agile we are. And it's not so much that agile is this thing we need to achieve, but working
Let's
individually
check off
is,
the official items on the list so that we make sure that we're really agile. I
yeah.
think the more check marks you have, the more fake you are.
I sometimes wonder about that. But all of software product development is how fast can we learn together? And if we think about that, that gets us very far, really almost everywhere we need to be for more agility in the organization.
Wonderful. Okay, so I want to pick up a couple of things there. Then I'm going to get to some of these wonderful comments that are flowing in. The first one that you said was, if we spend more time estimating and planning than we do actually learning from customers. Now I see that all the time, but let me just play devil's advocate for a moment, because some people listening or watching. And by the way, I should say this: if you need to go or anything like that, this is recorded, so you can go back to the same link you came to or come to the forum. We always put the recording there. Laura makes all that happen. So you'll be able to see this. And hi, if you're on the recording, don't worry. You can make your comments and ask your questions on the forum. Would love to see that. But if I'm one of those people, I might be saying, Johanna, that doesn't make sense. If I did more estimation and planning, I'd be more predictable, and that would be good, because then you said people really want to know what I'm doing and when I'm going to be done. If I can give them a roadmap and I can show them that I'm on track with the roadmap, having spent a lot of time with it, wouldn't that be better?
It would be. And I've never seen that happen. I mean, I would, I run a one person business, right? You actually have
So do
more
I. Yeah.
people. Well, you have Laura, you
I
have,
have Laura to help me, but yeah, it's
yeah,
basically me.
I
I always
mean,
tell people, you're looking at my people. I'm the one doing
right.
it, and you're the same. Yep.
Yeah. And I cannot predict from one month to the next what I will be able to accomplish. If I cannot do it for one person, how can we possibly do it for a team? I just don't know. I don't know if you have audiobooks for the Agile Conversation book.
Yeah.
And there was a big kerfuffle earlier this week or last week or whatever it was. And I am very busy moving my audiobooks out of the places I had them and into a different place. Right. This is all what I do as a publisher.
Hmm.
This is right. This is part of my product development. I had not planned on doing any of that at all. This is a huge interruption to my writing, which I find very offensive, and to the rest of my business. Right. So
But
everything
I bet it was more important to take that action for whatever reason it was that you felt was important than it was to write the next chapter of the next amazing book you're writing.
exactly.
And
Right. I always
adhering to the roadmap would have been a bad thing, because you wouldn't have taken advantage or mitigated the risk that was coming in.
right. The value of for me of doing this work now is much, much higher than the work I anticipated doing. And that's just me as a one person company. I see this all the time.
Yes. So I want to come back to this notion of surprise, because I think surprise is such a misunderstood notion in software development. And if you, I'll just give a preview. If you think surprises are bad, you think wrong. So surprises are good. But we can come back to that. I want to hit some of these fantastic comments that are coming in. I don't want to lose them. I'm just going to give a quick preview. Ryan says he wants to learn about how to counter upper leadership that thinks we're doing agile but really aren't. So I think that's fascinating. Let's come back to that one. Um, and someone, I don't always get to see who it is, but someone on LinkedIn says agile rituals can be overwhelming. And I think at the moment you start talking about rituals, that's when I start to get worried. That's when I start to think we're following this because someone said to, not because it actually benefits us. So maybe let's stick with that one for a minute. What do you think about agile rituals, Johanna? How do the things we do like stand-ups and retrospectives and planning poker and refinement? How do those all fit in for you?
The only mandated practice, if you look at the Agile Manifesto, is the retrospective. That's the only mandated practice. I happen to believe retrospectives are extremely valuable, and I find very little value in stand-ups, because in stand-ups we tend not to walk the board but ask about the individual's work. And
No, no,
once
let me
I
stop you for a
realized,
second because not everyone will know what walk the board is. I was just teaching someone to do that yesterday. It's so valuable. Could you just explain to folks who might not know what is walking the board?
so instead of asking the person what their work is, you take an item on the board that happens to be anywhere in progress. And you might ask this question. Well, I ask several questions. How old is this item? Is it still valuable? And what do we need to finish this item? Now, if you're like me, you walk the board from right to left, right? How do we move everything in the column that's closest to done over to done, right? So what are all of those items? Are they still valuable? What do we need to do? And then let's, as a team, decide what we need to do and when. And often this increases the collaboration among the team members. Instead of everybody having their own story, not a good idea. Now people are saying, "Oh, if I work with Squirrel and Jeffrey, because I've been listening to your podcast all along, I can finish this thing because I need their skills and capabilities." And now Squirrel and Jeffrey can say, "Well, we still have these items in progress. Which is more valuable to do?" This starts the team thinking about how do we manage our WIP, our work in progress. Now, we always manage our WIP if we're doing well. Most agile teams manage their WIP by saying, what do we pull into either a sprint or our board or whatever? But sometimes our WIP can get away from us. So that's why I start with the next to last column in the board, what's right next to done, and start walking the board. And I find that that works really well, because if we let our WIP get away from us, now we can fix it.
There we go. Now, Rob makes a very useful point here, and I'm just going to see if we can bring it up. He brings up a lot, so I'm going to have to sit up so we can see over Rob. But he says, any opinions on saying we're delivering X, e.g., velocity of this? But when you look, there are stories like planning spike, create database table, set up some test data. In other words, it's hard to find the customer value. Now, I'm thinking that if we're walking the board the way you're describing, we might say, hey, great, we're creating the database table. And if there are customers at our stand-up, which I love to have, then their eyes are gonna glaze over. We're not gonna be able to show them any value. So, what would you do with that if you came to that as you're walking the board?
So I would say no customer ever cares about your database table. No customer ever cares about your test data. They care about the outcome. So now you might not really be able to figure out what is the first slice of value. Yes, I want to talk about elephant carpaccio here. Um,
Yay, we got
th-
questions on
that,
that too. Go on.
yeah, that slice of value that's really important. And maybe you really can't figure out that first thing, that you see it all as a very big hunk of stuff. There must be a better term, but I'll call it a hunk of stuff. That's when we can say, as a team, how can we collaborate on this large thing so we can deliver something of use sometime this week? I would say tomorrow, maybe we would say 2 or 3 days from now, But this week, how do we make our slice through the application that delivers value? Now, as a part of that, we might have to set up some test data. We might even, maybe not the first time, do some kind of a database table. But if we're iterating over a feature set, we might say, oh, it's now time for the database, right? We've done everything we can with a flat file. We've done everything we can with ASCII data, whatever it is, right? We are now ready to do some kind of a database work that's going to be bigger, wider than our previous carpaccio slices. So we will bite the bullet and do our first iteration with the database. Fine, but we need to contain this thing, and not have tasks. Tasks are deadly, right? We might have to do tasks as a team to serve the outcome for the customer, but those are not stories. Those are all in service of the greater story that is a piece of value for the customer. Now, the customer might be the person down the hall who is saying, I need to see this because I'm your regulatory person and no customer can see this before I stamp my approval on it. That's fine, but it needs to
I've
be a
done medical
value.
devices where there were in-house compliance teams that would not let you out the door with it unless you had checked it 5 ways from Sunday.
Right. And that's totally fine. But those people have to see the product. We need to have a product focus.
And I'll tell you the funny story about that is I went down the hall to see those people when folks said to me, "Oh, Squirrel, we can never do this. We need to take 6 months to do anything because the compliance people won't let us." I went to see them and I said, we have this new way of doing things where in this world, the fastest we could get to really with all the things we had to check, because people would cut off parts of their bodies if they got the wrong result from our tests. So it you couldn't undo that. It really mattered. And so we said, but we can get to 2 weeks, which is revolutionary in biotech, right?
Right.
And I showed up to the compliance people and I said, what do you think about that? They said, my God, could you please do that? Please, that would be so wonderful. And I said, why is that better for you? They all said it wouldn't be. And they said, because we can never keep track of what everything is that's in the 6 months. What you're telling me is you're going to do one thing. And if you do one thing, we'll know what the heck it is and we can test it much more effectively and we'll be much more confident that we aren't going to kill any patients. What a great idea. So it doesn't matter whether you have those compliance and regulatory people. Those folks actually are often your biggest fans for delivering small slices of value. So I hope that's helpful. Now, we have a whole bunch of other things which I want to get to, which are directly on this point. So Freddie says, now, Freddie's written an essay, so I can't put him on the screen. You won't be able to see us. But Freddie says, there's often a drive from leadership to improve the efficiency of development, ship more with less. But the measures we have to play with tend to be tickets and story points, which is exactly what you were saying, Johanna. Instead, we should think about impact delivered, but it's much harder to prove in the short term. So what do you think about how you prove that value? So you've said, okay, great, we're going to try to move away from tickets and tasks and story points and database tables, but how do we prove the value?
You start to measure the cycle time for a feature. Right? That's how you say to people, it takes us on average, or even when you're starting with cycle time, I often ask the teams I work with to measure the last 3 or 4 stories that they delivered, right? The 4 things,
Stories.
3 or
The
4
things that
things,
are valuable to customers. Yeah, that's the key
right?
thing, not the task.
Right.
Yep, keep
Not
going.
tasks at all. And when teams start to measure their cycle time and they realize, oh my goodness, it takes us 4 weeks to deliver one thing. No wonder everybody is so excited and not in a good way. That's when I explain to them how all of the flow metrics work together. And when I explain that aging makes everything take longer, that your throughput decreases, your WIP increases, your cycle time increases, all of that is very deadly for any kind of efficiency. And that means we have to collaborate as a team. So one of the things, so everybody has heard me talk about collaborate as a team, and I keep doing this with my hands. And that's flow efficiency thinking Well, we don't have to measure flow efficiency. I know I never recommend that. I use the flow metrics. So I understand what is our width, what is our cycle time, what is our aging, what is our throughput. But I never measure the flow efficiency. But I can see the effects of delays when people think in resource efficiency. The more we keep every single person busy on their own stuff, the lower the higher the cycle time, the lower the throughput, the increase in width, and the increase in aging.
And just to illustrate that for folks who might be in this situation or might not recognize it, just imagine you have a team building the Android and the iOS applications. I have this real situation, got it in my mind. The Android and the iOS applications are being built over here, and over here is the back end of the database and the bits on a server somewhere that are keeping track of what's happening. In my particular case, it's train running times and passenger numbers and those sorts of things. And what you get is these folks over here building Android and iOS, and they can go a whole lot faster. And so they build up more and more stuff. This is the work in progress Johanna is talking about. And so they go faster, and they're very well utilized. They're pounding away. They're doing great stuff. They're typing all the time. And these poor people back here are trying to keep up with 2 inputs. There's twice as many of these as there are of those, and these guys can't keep up. And so I had a client just asking me yesterday, I'm going to write about this in my newsletter this week. He said, well, shouldn't I split these so that I have this kind of separated out? And I said, my God, don't separate. You need these teams working together on a common story, which is I can book a train or I can cancel my booking or whatever it is on Android and on iOS, and it actually shows up so the train operators know about it. I need all 3 of those elements. And if these guys over here need to slow down on Android and iOS and build some unit tests or do some testing on the database or to do something else that's not in their job description, that would be better. But typing more doesn't get them a better result. The way I often summarize this for folks is I want throughput over utilization.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Grokness, well, wonderful name, says that was the clearest explanation I've heard of why trying to optimize individual activity leads to slower progress overall. Fantastic.
Oh,
I'm glad if we could give you
excellent.
just that. That's very, very, very good stuff. Now, we've had a great discussion here where now I'm not sure who's responding to who, but I'm just going to show a series of these. So Rob says throwing out velocity and estimation leads to interesting discussions. And then Freddie says we did this and it saved us a day a week in planning. Now, and this is what we've been saying is that if you don't have this kind of predictability, then you suddenly open up an awful lot more productivity. And I have a whole notion called the tilted slider, which is all about how people can move on the slider from away from this sort of greater predictability, which people tend to want to have down here, and toward greater productivity, which is up here. But there's a force of gravity. And the force of gravity is this desire for control, and it pulls you down the slider. It pulls the slider down this way. Because people say, my God, I don't know what those engineers are doing. Maybe they could give me a roadmap and I'll get control. And they could do estimations, and then I could have more information. And the problem is that as you tighten that control, you reduce the productivity of the team. So Johanna, have you seen that?
Oh, yes. And this is why I'm so intent on more frequent demos. The more often you can demo what you have finished that's a value to the customer, the less often people ask you for plans. So,
Because you don't ask for a plan. Here's something I wonder how you think about this. When I get into a taxi, I do not ask the taxi driver for a flight plan. I don't say, are you going down this road or that road? Now I might say I happen to know that interstate such and so is blocked, so don't go there, and that would be helpful. It'd be helpful to give some information. But what I don't say is, please tell me that you're going to turn left on Fifth Street and right on Maple Street, and then as you get to Hobo Lane, you're going to go this speed, right? If I did that, the taxi driver would throw me out. And the reason is the taxi driver needs flexibility along the way to say, oh gosh, there's some roadworks here, there's a red light there. I know I have another pickup over there, so I'm going to go this way. The taxi driver knows a lot about the situation that I don't, and that I shouldn't care about. What I care about is that I'm on track we're going the right place. We should agree on the destination. I've gotten in taxis and been taken to the wrong destination before. I want to get that right. but the details of how I'm getting to the destination, so long as I'm continually moving closer to it and I can see that, hey, wait a minute, I'm not out here where I live near a whole bunch of sheep and farms and so on. I live way outside London. It's getting more and more urban. I'm going down a motorway. I'm getting to, I'm seeing signs for the London congestion charge. I know I'm on track to get to London. I don't need to know every detail. And if I did, I'd be controlling the taxi driver too much.
Well, and I think that the problem is we have very different needs for roadmaps. I wrote a series of roadmap posts that I will try and find at some point and send you the link. But it's if we think about the roadmap for the team is where are we right now and what is our next short-term goal in service of a product strategy, right? I mean, we always need a product strategy and we need to be able to change it. So the longer the roadmap, the less change we have built in. Well, agility is all about the ability to change and adapt to what we see in front of us, right? That's why the taxi driver, or in my case, the app when I drive into Boston, because I never drive into Boston without a traffic aware map. I would be crazy, right? So the team needs something that's very, very different from what you might want to show the customers, and that's also different from what C-suite needs, right? So C-suite needs to know when will we iterate on this much of our product strategy so we can redecide on the project portfolio so we can change the strategy for the organization, right?
Fantastic.
That's very, very different from what the team needs.
And we've had a great discussion in the comments here about whether velocity, for example, keeping track of how many stories or tasks you've got done, is an input or an output. It's definitely an input to the team. It's a team metric. It's not one that the C-suite, that is the CTO,
No.
CFO, COO, people like that, should be paying attention to. And we've got a great question. Again, we got to sit up a little bit. Danielle asks, how do you get C-suite level to get out of the weeds? They become very metric heavy all the way down to the tasks. How do you get them to let us deliver on outcomes versus in sprint metrics? Now, I have my own opinions about that. Johanna, what do you do about that when you hit it? Because you must hit it all the time.
I would say what data do you need to make good decisions? Right? Why do you want this data, team-based data? And then I say to the C-suite to make your decisions. I say to them, I would never tell you my weight because you are not going to hire me as a consultant based on my weight. You don't care about my weight. You care about my ability to get things done. Now, I guess if I didn't fit into your elevators, maybe that would be a problem. But you would never base any decision on my weight. My weight is as personal to me as the team's velocity. Now, the other thing I would do is tell the team, stop measuring velocity and stop with the story points already. Story points require magic thinking. Why would you why would you increase your magic in your organization when you can either count stories or even better, measure your cycle time? Your cycle time is reality. Story points are, um, I got a wand, I got a magic hat, I got a rabbit. Yeah, I mean,
No reality to them. Can't argue with you there. So Danielle has a follow up, which I think is really interesting. She says to someone else, there's a great conversation going on here. The C-suite, think that we can move faster than what we are currently. They're very project versus product oriented, and they care more about output than outcomes. So Danielle, my challenge to you would be, and you should talk to me about this. Get in touch, and I'll talk to you about this. I'd be happy to. I'm sure Johanna would as well. They don't actually think that. That's how they act. And I just want to refer you to the tilted slider again. You have this kind of slider and you can move it up and down. And if you're down here at predictability, you're like NASA. You get things completely done. You know exactly when it's going to be. Because if you don't launch the rocket at the exact millisecond, it won't get to Mars. Your software, I don't know what it is, but it's almost certainly not a rocket that has to launch at a particular millisecond. And so you don't have to be down here. But what happens, and therefore you could get more productivity by moving up, by doing the sorts of things that Johanna and I are talking about. what happens is that there's a desire for control. There's this force that is pushing your leadership to not trust you. And because they don't trust you, they say, well, I've got to get more control. I won't get as much done, or they may or may not consciously know that, but at least I'll know what Danielle is doing. And if Danielle's typing all the time, maybe that'll be better. But it is magic thinking. If I can somehow measure it, then it'll somehow be better. It isn't better, but what helps them is to build the trust with them by actually delivering. And so there's lots more we could say about that. Johanna, how do you deal with that when you hit it?
So that's when I say to people, and Danielle, for me, it's not so much product versus project oriented, because I happen to find projects a really useful container for this set of goals. Right, that's me, and that's why I always ask, what goals do you have for this project? How do we know when we have met the limits of this, so that this team or any of these people can go on to something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a different conversation, but
And
that's
what you
why.
don't allow is the answer when you do this number of story points or when you get this list of things done that are in the requirements, right?
Right,
So you're
right,
you're
that's
looking for the business goal. Our customers
right.
can make more money. They phone us less often. They renew more quickly. Whatever those sorts of things are. What are the business outcomes? And they exist somewhere.
Oh yes, and and maybe they only exist in somebody's head, which is why I really like to talk to people and say, how can we understand what done really means for us? How do we know that we're done with this set of value so that we can go on to something else? So that's a slightly different conversation. But the more often we deliver outcomes and the more we measure our cycle time and explain to our C-suite what cycle time means, right? That and then I actually have done stuff. If you have to use one of the common ticketing systems, I assign one story to everybody, right? Or one person on the team who is often a scrum master or a coach or a project manager. No single person has a task. Only this one person has all the stories, and then the one person says, in our God forbid stand-ups, but in however we decide to start planning for the next batch of work, how do we say who will work on this one thing of value? And often it's three or four or five people, and that way we don't have to worry about all these people futzing with the ticketing system.
Fantastic. And Danielle says that she was missing the business goals, and so it sounds like we might have helped her. So Danielle, feel free to ask more questions. That was a great one. Got us on a very good topic there. Joanna, you kind of nicely brought me back to something I wanted to pick up again by saying we want to measure for each of the stories what the value is, right? We want to get the cycle time. We want to make sure we understand its value. And I'm thinking back to the stand up, whether it's a God forbid stand up or a great stand up, and we're walking the board. Here's what I trained somebody to do this week, and I just wonder what you think. I said, don't even start with the tasks or the stories on the board. Start with your own board because he's the product leader. And I said, start with the business goals, back to what Danielle was saying, and start with those goals and walk them and make sure that, first of all, they should be on the board. So if they're not, that's why I like what you were saying, Johanna, somebody's assigned to the stories and we have a very clear sense of what the value of each one is and why we're doing it. And yeah, so he ran a session like that just yesterday. And the result for him was they talked about only one story, only one business outcome. But my God, it was the most important one. And they figured out in several places that there was greater collaboration they could do here, and they could get somebody off another task over there. And suddenly they were much, much clearer about how to make progress. So I just wonder what you think about that version of walking the board.
So I really like that. And what I often discover is that that one thing that has so much value might be several slices, right? If we think about the elephant carpaccio, and that's all we need to bring in for a sprint. If we want to use a sprint, we bring in one piece of value that is so important. We might not be able to really tear it apart, but it's so important the team does that one thing.
Fantastic. Now, let's think about sprints for a second because I signposted something before I want to make sure to come back to. One thing that I think is so important for teams to be ready for, and that's the danger of kind of fake agile being very, very rigid in your sprints. You can never break the sprint when you take that kind of philosophy. Is you can't deal with surprises. And surprises may be positive or negative. You had a surprise where you suddenly had to change how your audiobooks are published. That was a negative surprise, it sounds like, but it was an important surprise. So, Joanna, let me ask you this: if a kangaroo showed up at your front door, if you heard the doorbell ring and you answered the door and there was a kangaroo there, what would you do?
I think I would shut the door first.
Excellent,
and
protect yourself from the kangaroo. But then what?
and then I might actually I might open the door and say, "How can I help you?" And
Yes, you're going to talk
if
to the
the
kangaroo. Excellent,
kangaroo talks back to me, I have one direction, but the
right?
other direction might be call animal control, because
There you go.
this
Yep.
is I mean, this is not something I can deal with.
Hmm.
I have no idea. I mean, I live in Boston.
What's a kangaroo doing there? But
Right.
there are some people who, when they see a kangaroo, and their answer is shoot the kangaroo. And you, unlike me, live in a country where somebody could go and grab their gun and shoot the
Yeah.
kangaroo. And that's what some surprises are for some teams. There, well, no, the surprise has to be bad. We have to push the surprise away. We can't break the sprint. We have to keep it far away. And then there are other people who they shut the door and they never open it again. They go, well, we're just going to hide from this. We're going to pretend it's not there. And what the best thing to do, and the thing I always tell people to do, is to do something like, you were going to call animal control. You might call the local zoo. You might open the door and try to talk to the kangaroo. All those are great things to do when you're surprised, because a surprise is an opportunity. It's an opportunity perhaps to learn about a bad thing. That would be great. The kangaroo is dangerous. Dangerous wild animal roaming around. Let's tell all the neighbors. That seems important, but it's a
Yeah.
valuable surprise to learn about. Or you might learn about a new outreach program from the zoo where kangaroos come to visit you. I don't know, but the point is you're so many people are either shooting or shutting the door, and they never get the opportunity to learn. And the thing I emphasize so much, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is when you get a kangaroo, you should be ready to do something with it. You should be ready to learn from it. What do you think about that?
I really like that. I mean, I was really honest when I said I would probably first shut the door out of
Very
surprise.
sensible. Yep.
Right. And then,
But you
and
might
then,
look out the window. See, your instinct was to do something about it. Your instinct was
right.
to interact with it. I knew that would be your instinct because you've been doing this for 40 years, and you're an advocate of the same kinds of reactions to surprise that I have. But so many teams shut the door and run away, and that's the wrong
Well,
thing.
and this is where learning, in Cynefin terms, this is the
I was
probe,
just going
sense,
there.
respond, right? Um, the more we can learn safely about whatever this surprise is, the more options we have to deal with it. Yes.
I've spelt it wrong. Sorry. The problem, by the way, if you ever want to invent something new and wonderful, and Johanna, you've invented a lot of new and wonderful things, don't name it in Welsh because people will have trouble spelling it just like I did and
Yeah.
pronouncing it. But
Yeah.
that framework is so valuable to me. I'm thinking of writing on it more this year because the notion that there are some places, and all of us in software operate most often in the complex domain in Cynefin,
Oh, yeah.
where you want to learn things. Surprises are good and expected, and we often react as if we're in a different domain where surprises would not be welcome. But that's not where we live. That's not how it actually works.
Well,
Fantastic.
and most of life is actually in the complex domain once we're adults.
And the funny thing that I always talk about is our ancestors who survived to give rise to us are the ones who reacted badly to surprises. So we're kind of hardwired to deal with this because if you sort of heard a rustling in the brush and you thought, oh, I wonder, is that a nice yummy rabbit that I could go investigate? You got eaten by the lion most of the time.
Right.
And the smart ones are ones who ran and ran up the tree and stayed away from the lion. But there aren't lions out there anymore, which is why I use a kangaroo, not a lion, because a kangaroo is not likely to eat you. They're vegetarians, I think. But not very I have to use something else in Australia, but I don't think many people in Australia are awake right now. But the point is that Most surprises are kangaroos. Most of them are curious, very surprising. Why is there a kangaroo here in Boston? But my God, there are opportunities, and we should be jumping on them. It reminds me of something else that I wonder if you've hit, and if you have any, if you use this at all. Have you heard of Chesterton's fence?
I don't think so. Unless it was in
Ah,
an
so this is a
Agile
really valuable one.
conversation podcast and I missed it.
Well, it may have come up somewhere there. I know you're an avid listener. But G.H. Chesterton wrote lots of novels and books and all kinds of great stuff. But at one point, he pointed out to somebody that if he were to be thinking about taking down a fence, and he lived in a kind of rural area like I do, with sheep and cows and things around, and if he thought, oh, this fence is in the way, and then somebody should stop him. Somebody should say, no, 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 wait. If you don't know why this fence is here, that's a really good reason to not touch the fence until you understand what has caused the fence to be in this place, because it might be holding back, for example, a kangaroo. And it might be really useful to find out why the fence is there first. So I will not let you tear this fence down until you know why it's there. And so the principle of Chesterton's fence says, when you get a surprise, find out about it first. Understand what's going on with it. And only when you really understand it can you take some action which might be irrevocable, like taking down the fence. So
Right.
I just always think that notion is very helpful when customers come to me and say, "Oh, Squirrel, we really have to spend the next 6 months doing user research to find out whether this customer wants this or not." And I say, learning about the customer is really good. Couldn't you do that by actually interacting with the customer? Isn't there something you could do before you take these broader actions? Isn't there something you could do to more quickly learn? So, what do you think about speed of learning in those cases?
So I have had several conversations with user research people, and they almost all claim we need 6 months to figure anything out. And that's when I ask them the value question. What is the first thing of value that you could learn, and how give me three other ways you can learn it? Because if you don't know three other ways to learn it other than the one way you do now, I would postulate you don't actually understand the problem that you are trying to solve. Because I don't know anybody who has 6 months to spend on anything, right? Without making some kind of incremental progress as we go. I just don't know it.
Fantastic. And there's a really relevant question, excuse me, from my old friend Tuki. Hi, Tuki. Tuki writes a long version and a short version. I'll put the short version up in a sec, but let me read the long version. Value is a really difficult thing to get your head around. How do you quantify it when there is huge potential value, but we aren't sure how, when, if we'll realize it, versus there's some smaller value we could get quickly? And here's his more concise version. He wrote the long version, then the short version. I do that too. Does value have more than one axis? So what are your thoughts about value when people come to you and say, okay, fine, Johanna, you told me to go measure the value. How the heck do you want me to do that? And how do I know if it's short-term or long-term?
I really like that question. I think it does have more than one axis. Um, I think that there's the direct value for a problem we understand pretty well right now, and we need some kind of confirmational data. And then there's the in the project life cycles book, I have this product risk um, image that's all about how much innovation do we need. I think I think we actually understand when we need a lot of innovation because we don't understand very much. And I think we understand when we need very little information and we can plan and that's okay. All those problems in the middle, how do we know which innovation we need when? When do we need to iterate over prototypes? When do we need to deliver something that the customers can use now? And I think so. Steve Tukey, is that his name? Whatever.
We all call him Tukey. Because they're
Okay,
just like me.
Tukey.
There's lots of Douglases and not many squirrels. There's not many Tukeys. So that's what we all
Okay.
call him.
Okay, so Tukey, this is a really good question. I need to think about this more. And Squirrel, I bet you have at least one answer.
Oh, I probably have 7. So let me try to at least give Tukey one. And you know what, Johanna, I'll make this one of the topics of our follow-on forum conversation. You're in our forum, so when you've
Yeah.
had some further thoughts, maybe you can jump in on this one. But Tukey, I would say that there's a couple different axes. So there's not only just 2, but maybe 4 or 7 or something. We should come up with what they are. But when you say there's huge potential value of in this area, you're usually not breaking it down. And so when you're having that problem you're describing of there's huge potential value, but I don't know whether I should do it here or there or which bit, you haven't defined what your axes are. Let me give you a few that I might use. Those would be direct revenue. So is it going to make us more money? Will more people show up? Will they pay us more? Will they buy more of our product? Is it cost? What can we get the cost down? And therefore our margin is better, and we'll have the same number of users, but we'll make more from each one. Will it reduce our bandwidth? Will it reduce the sort of mental effort that's required? Can we think about our customers in a more efficient way? That would be another axis, and one that's often ignored, because if you can simplify things and make your product development that much simpler, that itself has significant value. Although it's harder to put a number on it. But the ultimate result would be you can get more done. I'm thinking here of somebody like Instagram, who said, look, we don't need tons of engineers. We don't need lots of very complicated social tools and so on. What we need is get the pictures up as fast as we can and to let people like them and tell their friends. And we don't need to do anything else. And they sold to Facebook for $1 billion with 13 engineers because they made sure that their product was extremely simple. And they kept that simplicity as an extremely high value for them, even though if they'd added ads and they'd added complicated tracking and even more filters and so on, they might have had more sort of short-term value. That would have come at a huge cost and complexity. So there's a few axes, but Steve, Tukey, we should be thinking of some more. So excellent question. Let's have more discussion on the forum. But Johanna, you mentioned something that I want to make sure I give you a chance to talk about because I don't understand it. And that is that you have this concept of life cycles, and you've just been writing about this in the most recent book. And I haven't got my head around it yet. So what's this project life cycle? How does it help you deal with fake Agile? And what's your sort of classification there?
So there are 4 major life cycles. The serial life cycle, which is the waterfall, which if Royce had just paginated his paper differently, we might never have used. That's a different problem. There are the iterative life cycles where we iterate over features with prototypes until we get to a point where we say, okay, we know enough to increment this and deliver that. And sometimes it's not until the very end of the project. Sometimes it's more frequently, but not every week or so. And then there are the incremental life cycles where we have a cadence, I hope, of delivery on a regular basis, but not necessarily on a sprint basis. And then there are all the combination life cycles, which I have used extensively with hardware, where we need to iterate on the simulations and the designs, because as soon as we go to physical form, it costs a lot to change. So anytime you have a high cost of change, you often want to iterate on the designs with simulations. And there are several ways to manage the combination life cycles. And then there are the Agile approaches. And I say that the Agile approaches require a cultural change to thinking in flow efficiency, right? Where we have a collaborative team, where we reduce the WIP to something manageable, where we measure our cycle time, all that stuff. And agility, an Agile approach is not a life cycle. An Agile approach is a cultural change. And that's why all these transformations don't work, because our senior leaders understand the word life cycle and they think agile with a capital A, is a life cycle. And it's not, it's a culture. And that means that we are set up to, our organizations focus on resource efficiency because that's how we have to report in cost accounting. Cost accounting focuses on resource efficiency, but we need flow efficiency for our agile culture. And that's where everything knocks against itself. And I say to people, understand where you are, right? There is not one wrong thing to do. You can create more agility in any approach as long as you are thinking, how do we collaborate? How do we reduce our WIP? How do we get more bang for our buck by by allowing us to ship more frequently so our cycle time is shorter, right? How do we do that? And that will increase our agility rather than using a framework or a tool or any of that. So that's why I wrote this book, because I'm very tired of fake agile. And it's the norm as opposed to something outside.
Fantastic. And we have a great question about this, which I want to sneak in before we're finished. And that's from our friend Ryan, who asks, leaders see its life cycles with a definitive start and end. And he wants to see them to see that differently. I think the iterative notions that you said throughout all of your examples of life cycles. But Johanna, how would you respond to Ryan?
So I would say, how can you show, well, one of the problems with all of the iterative approaches is you cannot put them in a Gantt chart, right? A Gantt chart is the wrong tool. So I would say to people, especially Ryan, where you have this, is to say, do we understand our project charter? What is the value of the work that we are doing? And then for this project, we are doing this kind of an approach, and we can expect our first either release candidate or release at sometime in the next month, and we will replan using rolling wave planning. We think, given what we know now, which is always the least at the start of the project, we think we will need several releases, um, more internally, and at least 4 or 5 externally, and we expect to learn these things at the end of every release. Right. Once we release internally, we will learn this. Once we release externally, we will learn that. We will keep informing you with our demos as we proceed. So you will always see everything we know at every given moment in time.
And what we're planning to learn next as we continue on the
Right,
cycle. The hint is in the name. It is a cycle. It goes around and it
right,
comes back again.
right, right.
Fantastic. What's the name of the book, Johanna?
Um, Project life cycles. Let me get the entire subtitle.
Even
How
Johanna
to
can't
reduce,
remember the whole title. That's okay. I don't remember the subtitle of Agile Conversations anymore.
yeah, how to reduce risk, release successful project products, and increase agility.
Fantastic. And Johanna, can people who are interested in finding out more and buying the book and doing other good things, is this the right place?
Yes,
jrothman.com?
yes, everything is there. Start there.
Fantastic. All right. Johanna, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you. As usual, we're just crammed too full of things, so we'll continue, especially on Tuki's very provocative question about value axes. We'll
Yes.
continue on the forum, and there's lots more exciting questions to ask and to answer there. So we'll certainly pick that up. And if you're interested in finding the forum, that's where you go, squirrelsquadron.com, where I love talking to people about all these interesting topics. And man, I get to have Johanna Rothman with us. What a privilege. So glad that you could be with us today. And those conversations are going to continue. The Squirrel Squadron is where you get tech and non-tech people together in a free environment where we can actually learn something from each other. What a crazy idea. And I've certainly learned a ton from Johanna, and so glad that you could join us.
And thank you for having me here. And I'm so thrilled to be a part of your squadron.
Well, glad to have you. We're going to stop there, but there's more conversation, of course, to have on the forum, and I'm sure we'll have Johanna back at some point. So very glad to have had this opportunity. Everyone have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week for next week's event, if not before then, on the forum. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.